I've started Big Finish. Any recommendations? Here's one for you. The Paternoster Gang series for Big Finish is one of those series where if I was just listening to them casually, I don't think I would have picked up. I don't think I would have even given them a second thought, because while I enjoyed the Paternoster Gang in the TV series, I didn't really think that there was much to be gleaned from a potential spin-off for them. However, with receiving review copies from Big Finish, I've been able to listen to their latest story arc, which is called Trespassers, and we're in the third box set of this Trespasser series. We've had Rogues Gallery, we've had the Casebook of Paternoster Row, and now we have the third instalment out of 4, No Place Like Home. This stars Neve McIntosh, Dan Starkey, and Catherine Stewart as Madame Vastra, Strax the Sontaran, and Jenny the Kung Fu fighting maid. From Paternoster Row, which we saw teaming up with the 11th and the 12th Doctor during the Stephen Moffat era of Doctor Who. And the story arc of Trespassers is that the Paternoster Row house has been infiltrated by a shapeshifter, which has taken the form of Jenny. The Casebook of Paternoster Row box set ended with Jenny escaping captivity and making her way through the London sewers in order to get back to Paternoster Row before her duplicate, her clone, her infiltrator, made it back to the house first. And the cliffhanger ending of that was Jenny has walked through the door, Strax is going to kill whoever walks through that door next, because Vastra and Strax have cottoned on that there is a doppelganger amongst them. No Place Like Home picks up immediately where that ending cliffhanger left off, with Jenny returning home and is kidnapped because even though she is the proper version, Vastra and Strax do not believe her. They have no idea who this infiltrator is, and they want to be super careful, super secret about it, so they lock Jenny up in a cage, and the duplicate Jenny comes home, and the three have to figure out what to do with the doppelganger in their midst. Strax wants to kill them with grenades, Vastra wants to get some more information, Jenny is trying to remain covert and undercover, so the three have to devise some sort of system in order to figure out how to tell when one of them is a doppelganger. The first story is Doppelgangers by Ken Bentley, and is a fun, farcical comedy. Let's play a clip from Doppelganger.
Strax, might you have a device which can force a shapeshifter to revert to their natural form?
Is that entirely necessary?
I have a device for detecting mutants. I'm sure it could be adapted to detect a wider range of species.
Good. In the meantime, we must come up with a way to quickly determine which of us is real.
And how do we do that?
We'll use a safe word.
A what?
It's a word one uses in role-play games.
What is a role-play game?
Now's probably not the best time to explain. All you need to know is that the three of us agree a word in secret that nobody else knows, and if ever we need to determine each other's authenticity, all we have to do is ask for the word, and only we three will know the answer.
A suitably devious plan, given the duplicitous nature of our quarry.
What word should we use?
It must be something distinctive, but also easy to remember in moments of ecstasy.
Beg pardon?
Anxiety. Easy to remember in moments of anxiety.
This is not a feeling with which I'm familiar.
Who can think of a word?
How about Schadenfreude?
It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue.
Well, you think of something
I'm trying!
I suggest an everyday object, but something witty and memorable.
such as...
I have it! Satsuma!
The perfect choice, Strax.
Thank you!
Right then. Time is of the essence, Strax.
Adapting the device now, Mom.
Out to my books. It might help if we can determine precisely what it is we're up against.
Mind if I pop out, Mum? See if I can follow a trail.
Good idea.
Danny Static in the chat saying, are you sure the writer's name isn't a stand-in and it was actually Stephen Moffat, given how horny this is? The fact that the Satsuma gag that I played is like the least horny joke in the entire episode. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Stephen Moffat has got a run for his money here. So basically, Ken Bentley, who wrote this, talks about taking inspiration from the Commedia dell'arte play, Carlo Goldoni's The Servant of Two Masters, which is a play from the 18th century about a servant who has got two masters and he's trying to stop the two from meeting. You might know this play better by its modern adaptation, One Man, Two Governors by Richard Bean, which the original West End run starred James Corden as the man with the two governors. That sums up Strax and Vastra and Jenny perfectly, where Strax is the servant character who has the two masters, Vastra and Jenny, Vastra and Jenny. And the big set piece of the Doppelgangers episode is the doppelganger Jenny trying to make a pot of tea to poison Vastra, while Strax is none the wiser as to what's going on. The real Jenny is trying to stop the tea from making its way to Vastra, and this comedy of errors as they make their way through the Paternoster house trying to get this poisoned pot of tea to Vastra, and Vastra is incredibly thirsty. If you folks know the play One Man, Two Governors or The Servant of Two Masters, you'll know that the big Act 2 set piece, the big comedy set piece that it's famous for, is when you've got the servant, or the man in this case, who is trying to make dinner for the two masters without letting them see each other, but he's also really hungry and wants the food to himself. This is the James Corden version, and this is basically what Doppelgangers is going for, and I think it succeeds.
God, look at this! Lamb chops, my favourite!
Trigger warning, James Corden. To be fair, James Corden, when he's doing this, and Gavin and Stacey, in that context, we stand James Corden. Credit where it's due. I'm sorry, you've got to admit.
Now, how am I going to do this? At the table? No! Here we are, sir! Lamb a la trolley carved at the table! Whoosh! I thought you were behind me. It's a funny old game, isn't it? Lamb carved at the table.
So if you folks want to know what the Paternoster Gang series is like, that's a really good barometer for it. So Doppelgangers mostly takes place within the Paternoster Row house, has a very small cast of characters. They go out briefly to meet a prisoner who they suspect might know more than he lets on about the doppelganger. There's also a fence called Phonopodio, played by David Holt, who's this alien fence, which is a really cool idea. I don't know if Phonopodio has been in previous Paternoster Gang stories prior to Trespassers, but it's a really cool bit of world building. But this is basically Vastra, Strax, and Jenny, and a doppelganger in one house in a farcical comedy of errors. And it's hilarious. It's genuinely gut-bustingly funny. The timing is on point. The performances are so strong. I loved it so much. How long has the chat not been on screen for? Have I not had the chat on screen this entire live stream? It's a really funny Doctor Who adaptation of The Servant of Two Masters, with Strax in the middle being the servant here, and it is a great distillation of the dynamic of the three. It's really funny. It's so snappy and punchy, and it culminates in a really funny action-packed set piece, which essentially almost destroys the Paternoster house, because of course Strax gets a little bit excited. It's really effectively done, and out of all of the Paternoster Gang stories in the Trespassers arc so far, Doppelgangers is it's probably either the best or maybe in the top two. It's so great, and Ken Bentley out of the gate with this story to establish the new status quo of the Paternoster Gang Big Finish spin-off universe hits out of the park straight away. Terrific stuff. So, the Doppelganger story, however, ends with Vastra being poisoned by a substance which is meant to kill Silurians. So, in order to try and cure her of this ailment, they travel to the Cornish coast in order to get her into the ocean, get the fresh sea air. This is a story called Jellyfish! Written by Neve McIntosh and Dan Starkey, who voice Vastra and Strax. And I think this is actually Neve McIntosh's first writing credit for the Paternoster Gang stories. This isn't Dan Starkey's first one. He's written quite a bit for Big Finish in the past. But Jellyfish is a story that opens with a gag about a Sontaran satnav, and it keeps getting funnier from there. You've got this cast of characters in this seaside town. You've got Maggie, played by Helen Phillips, who is the maid in this old Cornish house, which basically... what's happening is that this seaside tourist town, it does really well during the summer. However, during winter, it's difficult for the locals to make it through. There's very few supplies, there's very little tourism. However, every year, there appears to be some sort of shipwreck, and nobody can explain why. Vastra and Jenny and Strax find that quite suspicious, so they do their own investigation. They want to try and investigate the sea to see if Vastra is able to swim in it and make sure that she's able to regain her strength. And on the way there, Strax tries on a Victorian bathing suit. Let's play a clip from Jellyfish.
Go on, lass. Are you comfortable, ma'am?
Call me Vastra. Comfortable is not quite the word I would use.
She's an old one at that, but she'll get you out past these rocks.
It's a nice spot out of the pool.
Oh, lovely. I'm looking forward to a dip. How are you getting on, Strax?
Much as I applaud the functionality of a changing hut on wheels, it is hindering my ability to don this bathing suit. I am unsure of its armor capability. It seems flimsy.
It's knitted.
Meaning?
It's wool. Everyone wears it, usually. It'll stretch over your... that. Although when it's wet, it can be a bit unwieldy.
This wool should not be so... just one leg.
All right, here we are.
It's a little... tight. There.
Very fetching.
Now I can swim. Ha-ha!
Wait, Strax! Oh dear.
He's gone straight down.
Yes, he is quite dense. You see, he hasn't really done this before.
I don't know why, but that just made me laugh so hard when I was listening to it. So you have this really interesting tourist criminal conspiracy of these ships that are washing up on the shore of this Cornish town. You've got Mrs. Bligh, played by Kate O'Sullivan, who is the landlady of this home that Jenny, Vastra and Strax are staying in while Vastra restores her health. They think that they're French, and that's why Vastra looks the way that she does, and that's why Strax looks like a potato man. They think, oh, they're just French tourists. Let's look after them during their stay here. That's just Victorian London. Very accepting. You also got Mr. Bligh, played by Wayne Forrester, who is just this put-upon husband who just does everything that his wife says. You've got David, who's in love with Maggie. The two are wanting to get married. However, Maggie has got this debt to the Blighs because she was on one of the ships that washed up years ago, and she was the only survivor. Her family died on the ship, and the Blighs took her in, and she's repaying her debt to them. You know, this nice little mini arc. And you also have some world building with Vastra and some Silurian technology that they find in the Cornish coast. The main issue with this story, while Jellyfish is fun, and I think the Maggie and David subplot is really, really nice, it seemed a bit too similar to Paternoster, which was the Gary Russell story from the casebook of Paternoster Row, where the three are investigating some criminal underhanded conspiracy, and then they find a lot of technology that's related to the Silurians and some aquatic threat and stuff underground. It's very, very similar. And I know that when you have a series of 12 stories with the Paternoster gang, you're going to have some repeating themes or maybe a couple of repeating ideas in this Victorian London setting, or in this case when they move out to the Cornish coast. But for it to be the same point in the box set, like one box set later, the middle story, I think that it's a bit too similar. It means that this story doesn't really have that many surprises in it. The villain is exactly who you expect it to be. The motive is exactly what you'd expect it to be. And while the cast are good, the humour's really on point, and there is just some really fun, it's a nice change of scenery to go outside of London while the doppelganger still back in London does nefarious stuff behind the scenes to set up the next story. It is very similar to the Paternoster story from the last box set. If these were standalone box sets, it wouldn't be an issue, but the fact that this is meant to be one long series, long arc, all of these stories follow after the other. The Gentleman Thieves box set ends with that cliffhanger, which leads into Doppelgangers by Ken Bentley in the next box set. It does become a much more noticeable problem that it is repeating these same beats. Apart from that, though, Jellyfish, ! Not optional, is fun. Next up, we have The House Guest by Matt Fitton. After the events of Jellyfish, Vastra, Jenny and Strax return back to Paternoster Row. However, the place is not like they found it. It turns out that all of the windows of the neighbouring buildings have been smashed in, the doors have been kicked down, they've been robbed blind, basically. Their home was basically nearly destroyed at the end of the doppelganger story, so it's basically identical to how they left it. However, it's identical in every respect but one. There's a new resident in the Paternoster house, and his name is the Doctor. He's claiming to be the Doctor, at least. However, Vastra does not recognise him. This is a brand new face for the Doctor. They've not encountered Patrick Troughton's incarnation before, the second Doctor, so they believe that he is a doppelganger. And it's also complicated somewhat by this being a Beyond War Games Big Finish Season 6B Doctor, who has had his memory tampered with. And the second Doctor is like, you claim to know me, you claim to know the Doctor, but because of some stuff I can't talk about, I don't remember you. And Vastra's like, how very convenient. So they discover that in their absence, there's been this great big vacuum where a new crime lord has risen to the top of the food chain on Paternoster Row and has basically laid waste to the Paternoster Street. Let's play a quick clip from The House Guest.
It was hardly Piccadilly Circus when I arrived, but over the past few weeks, it's become a ghost town.
I ain't never seen the place like this.
It is unusually quiet.
Too quiet.
I'd say every other house on the street has been turned over.
They all appear correctly orientated to me.
Jenny means they've been robbed, vandalised.
Paternoster Row has become a place of threat and violence.
Ah, the neighborhood is finally on the up.
I've been noting comings and goings. One by one, your neighbours have all moved out. Mr. and Mrs. Fortescue last week. The snooty fellow at the end of the row stuck it out the longest. He and his household departed yesterday.
Then let us begin our inquiries there, at number 5.
It's a really cool idea for a story to have this incarnation of the Doctor that does not know the Paternoster Gang. And he's dropped right in the middle of the story where all of the Paternoster Gang, particularly Vastra, are very much on edge and aware that there is a face changer who is able to take the identities of those that they trust running around. Of course, there is the wrinkle that Jenny and the Doctor bring up that if I was trying to infiltrate you, why would I use a face of somebody you do not recognize? However, the second Doctor does not make a good case for himself. He's bumbling around a little bit. This is kind of an unknown environment for him. He's surrounded by unknown people. He recognises the Sontarans, though, and he looks at Stratch and he's like, how long did it take for you to domesticate him? Which is really fun. Michael Troughton is great in this story. Michael Troughton has been great across all of his second Doctor adventures with, The Conspiracy of Raven, James Robert McCrimmon, Beyond War Games, etc. He's been terrific, and he brings that really high standard of impersonating his father, Patrick Troughton, impersonating the second Doctor. He brings that high standard here to this box set as well. The House Guest sets up some interesting, new world building for the Paternoster Gang Street, where you've got Mrs. Wiggins, who owns this pie shop. It's very like Miss Lovett from Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, where the pies are not exactly what you anticipate them to be. It's not cannibalism, because the Paternoster Gang stories tend to skew a little bit, they're more family friendly than your traditional Big Finish spin-off fare. This isn't Torchwood. This is a more family friendly comedy farce type of spin-off series, and it does stick it to its guns there. There is no cannibalism in The House Guest, unfortunately. However, when we get to what the actual revelations are as to who the crime lord is, as to what's been happening in their absence on Paternoster Row, it doesn't really have an ending, because it does lead into the finale of the Paternoster Gang box set range. We've got Volume 4 coming out in March, the Paternoster Gang at Trespassers 4 Last Stand. So this does not have a proper ending. It does conclude the story arc with Vastra and the second Doctor, but in terms of actually concluding everything else, this is definitely the end of Act 2 as we go into the finale, as we go into the final act of the Paternoster Gang Trespassers. So overall, I think that the box set, No Place Like Home, starts incredibly strongly. I think Doppelgangers is an all-time Big Finish Doctor Who comedy banger. Ken Bentley, who also directs the box set and does a terrific job, is, he hits out of the park with Doppelgangers. Jellyfish is also really funny. It's just repeating themes from the previous box set. And The House Guest has this really strong dynamic with a duplicitous second Doctor and Vastra, who is untrusting of this face who, ideally speaking, she should, respect and trust and adore, the Doctor being one of her oldest allies and closest friends. But there's those little wrinkles and the things that don't quite add up there. That's a really strong central dynamic here. I really, really liked that. But in terms of the actual story itself, I wasn't too enamored with the new cast members introduced to Paternoster Row in The House Guest, mainly because whenever we cut to them, I was just significantly more interested in the Doctor dynamic with the Paternoster Gang here. I thought that was much more interesting. And also the little nuggets of information about, the Beyond War Games range, and where is this Doctor? Is he traveling with Jamie? Has he met up with Zoe yet? What's going on here? Has his memory been altered? Is Raven looking for him? The TARDIS is in the Paternoster house, however, it's not making any noise. You know, it's been turned off. At least that's how it appears from the outside. So if that's the case, you know, is this just a police telephone box that's been brought back, and this doppelganger is trying to put a new spin on the Doctor? You know, there's a lot of things to think about. But outside of that, I wasn't particularly enamored with the rest of the plot elements and the other characters in The House Guest. They were fine, you know, and like I really liked the Sweeney Todd allusions as well, with the pie shop down the road. But this is definitely the end of the second act and leading into a finale, which looks set to be pretty cool. You've got Paul McGann, the 8th Doctor, who was in the first Trespassers box set as well. You've got stories from Alan Ronald, Helen Goldwyn, and Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle. The final problem, I think that they're going for a Sherlock Holmes type of finale here. We'll see. Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle, absolutely amazing for this range as well. They're really, really great writers. So yeah, we'll see. Last Stand looks pretty exciting. No Place Like Home is a vital chapter in the ongoing story arc of the Infiltrator in Paternoster Row. But it's a box set on its own. It's hard to recommend because it is like the end of the second act of the story. So listen to this if you've been keeping up with the Paternoster Gang range. If not, listen to the Paternoster Gang range. Somebody at the beginning of the segment asked, you know, what ranges should I listen to from Big Finish? Listen to the Paternoster Gang. You can start from Trespassers 1 if you want to as well. There are more from like earlier on when they first started, but this is its own standalone story arc across these 4 box sets. So you can start with Rogues Gallery if you want to, and it's a really good start. This range is like a hidden gem for Big Finish, and it's one that I think everyone should be listening to if they're into their comedies. It's really fun. There's some really strong character work over the course of the story as well. There's a really great dramatic beat towards the end of Gentlemen Thieves as well, which involves like a clone crime wave, and the way Strax reacts to the fate of these clones is actually a really effective dramatic beat. There's just some really good stuff here. There's a really, really lovely moment in this box set as well, where Vastra discovers that the Jenny that she married in the first box set, the marriage where 8th Doctor was in attendance, was not actually a marriage to her Jenny. And that really, really upsets her because she thinks she's about to die because she's been poisoned. And she's like, oh, I never actually got to marry the woman that I love. And it's a really lovely emotional beat. Neve McIntosh is so great. I think she's doing a lot of the dramatic heavy lifting, while Dan Starkey's doing a lot of the comedic heavy lifting. But it's a really great dynamic between the three. Forget the war between the land and sea. I want a Paternoster Gang spin-off. And it's amazing that we've not seen these characters on TV for over 11 years. We last saw them on screen in Deep Breath. That's a crime. That's an actual crime.